Enzo Narciso. It is so great to have you back on Stories from the Field. Welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me, Will.
You were first on this podcast way back in October of 2020. Whoa, so much has changed since then. Episode 98, and we're now at 270 something or other. Why don't you share the story of your life since then and about your new service that you're providing at Life Strategies?
Yeah. Yeah. Since 2020, what a time it was back then in 2020. And at that time, I was 3 years out of pretty wild addiction and crazy lifestyle. And I was getting my footing in the world really for the first time since I was like probably 14 or 13. I was off my rocker, I guess you could say. And basically,
why don't you give a short summary of episode,
sure,
which was you telling your story, and that was, I think it was a season of students. So why don't you just share a quick summary?
Yeah,
what your life was till October 2020.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I grew up in Seattle, and my parents divorced when I was about 11, and basically my family unit was completely changed. And a lot of families experience this, unfortunately. But for me, it was a super impactful thing. And I didn't really understand how it affected me. I just had all these feelings that were just coming out in the wrong ways. But kind of found weed to help deal with that. And school was always a challenge for me. I like to say I have a case study of ADHD. If they wanted to study ADHD, they could take me and study me. So I fell in love with the weed because it just helped calm me down and let me feel good. And that kind of led to a loss of a bunch of friends that I had grown up with. And so that kind of developed over like 7th, 8th grade. And then in freshman year was full cutoff mode, where I just didn't really hear from any friends that I was living really close to. I was really blessed to live in a neighborhood full of all these kids that were exactly my age and my grade. They fully turned their back on me in that freshman year of high school. And I spent a really lonely freshman year, and the weed use just increased, and it got a lot more frequent, and I started to care less if I would get caught. I'd play video games just all day. And what happened was I eventually, in sophomore year, I was the younger of the grade, so I was about 15. And sophomore year came around, and I found a group of friends that were really the most problematic kids at the school, or they were the kind of living the craziest at the school, like the troublemaking kids. And we clicked right away and just had a bunch of crazy experiences together and became super close. And what I loved about them was that they were just there every single day. And they came from families where also it was families that had divorced, or parents aren't around too much, or some other kind of circumstance where they're sort of on their own. And so we ended up spending a lot of our time together, and like by a lot, like it was like Monday to the next Monday, like all day. It didn't matter if it wasn't like when your homework is done, you can go hang out. It was just like, we're just hanging out all day. And that led me down a path that got really intense really quickly. And my mom noticed that and decided to have me sent to Elements. And so I was transported to Elements, and we can get into that later in the episode, and went on that journey for the next 4 years ish. I was 16 at the time and went through Elements, went to Crossroads after that, came home, went crazy again, went back to Crossroads, came back home, went to a different detox, floated around from rehab to rehab in different kind of situations. And then eventually in 2017, I overdosed on fentanyl. And what happened there was I learned to walk again. I was in a medically induced coma for 3 days, learned to walk again, learned to use my hands to eat with silverware and read an analog clock again. And basically they were saying he might be quadriplegic, or he might make it back at some capacity, but we're just not sure. And by the grace of God, I was given all of my physical privileges back that I have to walk, to read a book, and to see, and to be able to go to the gym and work out and hike and different things. So it took about a year of slow walking and everything, but everything came back. And so I decided shortly after I got out of the hospital that it was a month of physical rehabilitation in the hospital. After I got out, I decided that this is just going to be, this is it. I can't keep dancing with this lifestyle anymore, and I'm going to suffer a consequence if I don't make a change. So I moved to California, and then I got my life together. I went to another drug rehab, got out, and continued kind of living in California in a less crazy lifestyle, more healthy lifestyle, and things just started to go really well for me. And so that's when we had episode 98.
Yeah,
about 3 years.
You were studying psychology at the time, I believe.
Yep. So I was studying psychology down in San Diego. And people can listen to episode 98 if they're interested more in how that all was. Yeah. And
you were transported to, meaning that people picked you up in the middle of the night and brought you to Elements Wilderness Therapy in Utah. We'll get into that more in this episode, but let's talk about what you're doing right now at Life Strategies.
Yeah, so Life Strategies, so it's a mentorship program, and the focus is kids that are coming home from drug treatment centers or wilderness or some kind of program like that. And the idea really stemmed from working in the industry and seeing that, gosh, these kids are just going home, and they're going home with no kind of safety net, no kind of positive influence. In some cases, they go right back to the same environment. And oftentimes it's a little bit of a wild ride of that first little while when they get home. And I started doing it on the side and while I was working at Crossroads. And what happened was it started to see that it was sort of working. And so I decided, let's just do this. And so really the goal is to provide like a good influence that we know is in the kid's life, and providing those kind of support systems after the kid transitions home. So it's not a replacement for therapy, or it's not a replacement for the wilderness or any kind of other treatment, but more of like, once you're home, it's just a way to ensure that there's still some positivity at least coming into these kids' lives.
Yeah, and you use the term mentoring versus coaches, right? Can you help us define the differences between the two, and what's the website?
Sure. Yeah, the website is lifestrategiesmentors.com, and the difference between coaching and mentoring is that coaching is kind of, life coaching is where you're banking on the fact that your client has all the answers, and it's about you asking really open-ended questions to guide them through their thinking on achieving that goal. And mentorship is more of like, I've been through this situation before, and I'm going to help you go through that situation too. And it doesn't mean I'm going to make you into like a little me and tell you this is the job that you should do, and this is exactly what you need to do. And if you don't do it by this time, there's a deadline and different things like that. But it's more of a walking through a certain process that I've been through or that a different mentor has been through, and then helping guide that process along for the client.
And so a lot of your work is virtually, or all of it, or sometimes you go face to face. How does that work?
Yeah, so it's a hybrid. So in the beginning, I'll go and visit the client. And if the client is in a state where I am, then I'll see them in lieu of the video call. But originally, at first, it'll be an in-person meeting. And then after that, it'll go to online if I'm not in the same state as the kid.
Mm-hmm. And then this season, we're really digging in the mental health of men and boys and the role of the outdoors. You grew up in Seattle. You ended up being transported to a program in Utah, the deserts of Utah, which you go into on episode 90. But how did it impact you, like the nature and the outdoors, when you first went to Elements? And also, how is it part of you today?
Sure. Yeah. Before elements. I was never a real outdoorsy kind of guy. During the summers, I used to like to longboard when I was a young kid. And so that was outside, but I'd never been camping. And we spent one night in a tent behind my cousin's house one night. And then halfway through the night, we all went inside. And my cousin lives like near the airport. Like he's not out in the wilderness or even near it. It was a shocker. It was a major shocker. And I really didn't like it at first. I'll be honest, the whole time I didn't like it. And but the thing that I couldn't ignore is there's a Zen state that you get into from time to time, or at least that I would get into while we were hiking. And sometimes we'd be hiking and we'd be playing a game called Contact. A lot of kids, if you're listening to this, you'll probably be familiar with the game. But a lot of the other times I would be kicked out of the group and I'm hiking 200 feet behind everybody else with one staff and I'm just walking, or other times it's just silent on the hike. And at the time it was mostly hiking was the wilderness experience. And it was a full day of hiking every day, except for the therapy day. And during that time, I got to know myself, I'd say. I wouldn't say right when I got out, I knew myself perfectly well, but looking back on those times, like when you spend the day doing the same thing over and over again, you get into this thing where you're left with your thoughts that change from day to day, rather than like your activities or the music or the different people that you're talking to throughout the day. You're talking to the same people all day in the wilderness. And so it let me, I really got to know myself, I'd say, during that time. And of course, the staff are trained to help you go through things like that. And they teach you things about like mindfulness. And that's another thing, like mindfulness, being present, identifying the emotions that you're feeling. Those are things that I had never, ever heard of and didn't really hear too much of after I left Crossroads until I went to new rehabs and things like that. But I'd credit mindfulness and being present and identifying emotions. Those three things that I got from the wilderness with a lot of the success that I have today. And I'll explain a little bit of that. It's like, you know, when I'd be in a job or I'd be in a situation and I'm seeing somebody that's like very frustrated over a smaller thing that's not actually going to impact us in the course of the day, but let alone like the course of the week or the course of the business or whatever it is. It's pretty clear to me when I see that person isn't being super mindful about their emotions. They haven't really nailed down like what it is that they're feeling. They're frustrated about something, and that kind of perspective of let's think about our emotion. What are we feeling right now? Why are we feeling that? Those kind of questions, like those came from the wilderness, and it ingrained in me a process of, oh gosh, like, all right, I'm feeling anxious right now. Let's figure out why. And like, why is that? And once you can identify a feeling, it's much easier to go about your day and to be able to deal with that feeling and then acknowledge it and move forward rather than just let it hit you and then let it take you for a ride. And so I was a lot more able to notice like who are the people that are able to tolerate that kind of thing. That's something that I really credit the wilderness with. And I say it because I don't think anybody really ever asked me, Enzo, how are you feeling before I went to the woods? I'm sure somebody did at some point. I don't really remember it. And then I get to the woods and everybody's talking about, oh, how do you feel? Let's make an I feel statement. And there's a framework for like how to go about that. And after doing that a lot, it let me be able to say, oh gosh, what am I feeling right now? And that is a major advantage when you're going through life, I'd say.
And do you take some of those lessons and use them at Life Strategies to tell your mentees, to help your mentees? And do you integrate the outdoors into it?
Yeah. So a lot of the time, something will be happening in a kid's life or something, and they're going for a ride. It's taking them for a ride. And part of it is, okay,
metaphoric ride, not a literal ride.
Yeah,
metaphorically. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And so let's just say, okay, like, wow, this is a situation here. Let's just acknowledge that really quickly. And so part of that, and a lot of them have gone to the woods, so it's not as foreign of a thing to be like, what is this going on right now? But part of that is from the woods, and that ability to step away and say, okay, let's observe this from a third person kind of perspective. Let's just go over this situation really quickly and look at it. And so that came from the wilderness. And of course, if I'm in the same state as, for example, I have one client that likes to hike, and there's there's a certain Zen state that you get outside. And I think it has something to do with us spending 99% of our time outside as a species, humans. And then now we're inside most of the day. And so when we go outside, it's like a revisit to that original where we were spending most of our time. And so when you're able to do that, you're able to like access the things that are present in your life indoors, and you're able to see it from the view of like where you really were in as a human before. So I think that's again, like another major benefit of the wilderness is like being able to just really absorb all that and then see it from that perspective when you're in that original state where we all were for hundreds of thousands of years.
For parents or educators or therapists, educational consultants, what guidance would you offer if they're supporting a young person who's struggling with direction, confidence, or emotional growth?
Yeah, so this is majorly common. So direction, I'll start with direction. Direction is one of these things where it's, okay, is he going down the wrong direction, or are they not going in any direction at all? Mm-hmm. And oftentimes I see the not going in any direction. And the number one thing there I'd say is you got to just choose a direction and dive headfirst down that direction. And then if you decide, okay, I don't actually like this, then dive in another direction. But the main thing here is like start somewhere. And I think this part of this comes from the world that we live in, and we're so blessed to live in it, is that we have so many options and we have so many different routes that we can take. And kids hear about, okay, what are you going to do when you're older? Are you going to go in the medical field? Are you going to go into business? Are you going to go into banking? Are you going to go into outdoor therapy? Are you going to be, oh, you're going to be a therapist. What kind of therapist are you going to be? Oh, you're going to be a doctor. Are you going to be a phlebotomist? Are you going to be a surgeon? Are you going to be, and there's all kinds of different options in this world. And what we get is this kind of concept called like decision fatigue, where there's just so many decisions and you're frozen because there's so many decisions and you want to make the right one. Every kid wants to make the right decision and there's so many to make. So the thing about life that I've learned is it's like at least for my life, it's been consecutive leaps of faith, one leap of faith into the next leap of faith, into the next leap of faith. And somehow we end up here today. And when you're not taking those leaps of faith, you sit and you're stuck directionless, right? So I would say just start on one path and then see what happens. And if you chose the wrong one or you don't like it as much as you thought, then take your next leap of faith and let's just start on a new one. But it comes down to taking action in the moment and just deciding, okay, we're going to do one thing, we're going to try it, and then we're going to see what happens, and then rolling with it from there. And I'll give it an example. And there's an example that a kid asked me, and he said, man, I feel like I should go to college. I'm thinking about what to do, and I just don't know. And I said, you know what? This is advice that I got when I was actually in the same exact position. I called a guy that and I said, man, I said the same question. And what he told me was just choose something and just go and do it. Just choose the first thing that you think about and just sign up for it and then just see what happens. And I thought, man, that is just the craziest advice you could give me. Like, how are you serious? I should think about this kind of thing. But what happened was I did it and it worked, and it actually worked. And so I told the kid, you know what, dude, just sign up for whatever thing you're thinking of. If it's business, sign up for business and just do it. And so that's the kind of thing is you just got to get in motion most of the time. And so confidence now, I'll kind of dive into the confidence part. This is something that I kind of debate with myself. It's like, are we born with confidence or do we learn it? And a lot of the things I do and the experience I've had in life, I'm leaning towards that we learn confidence. And so this is where it's so important to have somebody in your life who can exemplify it. And so I'm super blessed to have a father who was a confident man. He is a confident man. He likes to win. He wants to win. He's happy to win. He wants to go somewhere. He has something that he's doing. If he's doing something, he's pretty sure he's going to do it well, or he wants to do it well. And I learned like, that's the way I want to be. And I want to be able to just choose something and then have the confidence, like if I do something, I'm going to be able to do it. And there's a whole concept called self-efficacy that is super tied with confidence. And the therapist and a lot of people will know what that means. But basically, it's the belief in yourself that when you have an effect on your life, right? And so I think if you're around people that have a strong sense of confidence and strong self-efficacy, you're going to be able to pick up on those cues and see how they are and to be able to embody that for yourself. And unfortunately, the opposite is true too. So if you have people around you that are just subject to their life and they're not really positive, they're going to be able to make something of it and they're just going from thing to thing and not really too sure of themselves. And that, unfortunately, I think will lead on to the observer of this. And so that's why Crossroads, when I would train staff, I'd just tell them, listen, when you're, say, for example, there's a consequence that needs to be given or something, you can't do it and not be sure that you're going to do it. It has to be something that you're pretty positive. This is the situation. We're going to lean into the fact that we're pretty sure we're right. And this is where we're going. And so that kind of thing brings a lot of security to people that we lead, right? Because they're looking to you for leadership. And I really try and embody confidence in my life and hope that passes on to the people that I work with, and the staff that I've trained and things like that. And so I think it's about exemplifying it for ourselves.
Wow. Clearly, you've been doing lots of work and helping a lot of people. And since 2020, when you were on this podcast, there's been a lot of narratives and stories about people who really feel like that their experience in wilderness therapy was abusive. And they're also pointing out the major thing that many start out with is that transporting in the middle of the night from their homes was traumatizing. Now, you can only speak for your experience, but I would imagine you've heard that, or people have reached out to you about the field, because you went to Elements 2 times. I don't know if you were transported both. Could you reflect on that now? It's been many years since that experience and 5 years since you first talked about it on this podcast. I'd love to hear your thoughts now, 5 years later.
Sure. Yeah. So just for clarity, I went to Elements 1 time and I went to Crossroads 2 times. But nonetheless, I was transported for sure on that first time to Elements. And speaking for myself, like you mentioned earlier, if I was not to be transported to Elements, there's no chance that I would have gone to Elements. And looking back now, I know that Elements and being in the wilderness, whatever it was, is probably one of the most important experiences that I've had in my life. And without being transported there, I would never have given myself that opportunity to go and experience that. And I understand there's a lot of situations. Kids get transported and they're not all in situations like I was. And whether I don't think it's acceptable to make a blanket statement for yes, 100%, everybody needs to be, this is the one way that it should be done. There's many ways to go about, there's many ways to skin a cat, they say. And so for me, in a situation like mine, it was so severe that it was necessary and I would not have ever gone. And I'm so grateful that it did happen exactly the way it happened. And I was living a lifestyle that was so chaotic and there were so many crazy things going on, so many different wild events that I never thought would happen. They happened. And being transported was just like one more of those things. It's okay. This is a new experience. Like, we're going to be okay. And I wasn't ever really concerned about what was going to happen, or I understood that these people are not here to hurt, right? And there were situations where sometimes it was like not clear whether that was the case. So I knew in that moment, these people are not going to hurt me. They're bringing me to some kind of thing that my parents told me, like just 2 minutes ago, told me about, like, all right, fine. And so I just rolled with it. And personally, out of a lot of the kids that I know that were in the wilderness and that I went to boarding school with and everything like that, I didn't hear anybody really say, oh my gosh, that was a really traumatic thing. I know that it happens for some people, and I've heard about it through the grapevine of online news and things that come out. People say it's been quite traumatic for them. But in my experience, I haven't really met anybody that is traumatized by that. And most of the time it's been like, I wouldn't have really gone unless that was the case. So that's my experience around that kind of issue.
I would think that the people who were transported and had a good experience like you had, or at least an experience that you look back and said, wow, I needed this because I was going in a way that was going to lead me to perhaps prison, perhaps death, perhaps something else. That if you're surrounding yourself with people who think in that way, then we must assume that there's other groups like that was that, and because we tend to surround ourselves with people who confirm our viewpoint. And I am not judging either. I'm just saying these things have happened. There's lots of information.
Sure.
And some people, all wilderness should be gone. There's no wilderness therapy. And then there are others like, no. And what I hear from you, Enzo, is this really helped change your life.
It did. It helped change my life. And that the way it happened was the only way that was going to happen. And I was the kind of kid that you tell him he's grounded, he just leaves anyway. Or you tell him he has to go to school, he doesn't go to school. And so what are you going to do when you have a kid like that? And I can 100% confirm that I would not have gone to the wilderness therapy without being transported for myself.
And through that experience, and then obviously you overdosed, you went to therapeutic schools. So it wasn't just one thing, it was a process that helped change you. And I'm wondering, what was the outdoors a major catalyst of that? This podcast is stories from the field, mental health and the outdoors. How much has the outdoors impacted your mind and your thinking?
Yeah, definitely. It was a part of the story. And, something that's important to note is like this journey that a lot of these kids are on, and it's the furthest thing from a linear process that you could ever get. It's a completely non-linear process. There's going to be progress, and then there's going to be collapse, and then there's going to be major progress, and then there's going to be a setback, and then there's going to be some kind of breakthrough, and then there's going to be a total breakdown. And the wilderness was the first step that happened for me that set that process in some kind of positive motion, whether it be a direct straight line there or up, down, left, right, backwards in a circle. And I think the outdoors had a major part to do with that, just based on the things that I said earlier, the skills that I learned and the character development, really. And I think, a lot of it comes from what is the concept of wilderness therapy. Get out into the wilderness, remove yourself from the environment, get away from the phone, get away from the friends, get away from the drugs. And I think that was just a major point where I was able to say, okay, like this is what standard baseline life is. And then now let's go to boarding school. I didn't say let's go. I didn't really want to go, but I said, okay, now I'm going to boarding school. And it was just a process of start out here and then move to the next place. And then what do you take from that? Sometimes we don't know for many years. And being 11 years out of the wilderness, 11 or 12, I took a lot from it. And I know that now. And that's kind of part of the thing. It's like you got to wait a long time to see what effect something is really going to have on your life. And even after a long time, we might even see a different effect later on. And it's just about sticking it out and seeing what happens over time. And as time goes on, I'm more and more grateful for the wilderness for sure. And so I would say it was a major beginning to the catalyst of the kind of process of getting through that phase. And that's how I'd answer that one.
Yeah, and it's brought you to the place of providing service to others at Life Strategies. And you work with all genders, or is it just boys?
Male only. Yeah, male only.
Okay. Are there any new programs or adventures or mentorship opportunities coming up for you? What do you want to share? Anything that you got going on? Even if it's for a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I've been doing a lot of guest speaking right now, obviously accepting clients too. So anytime I say this, it's like, anytime I'm able to make use of the wild ride that I went for, it's a blessing to me, and it's an opportunity for me to make use of that. And it redeems me in a way. And that's why I love doing this so much, because it makes use of that time that was just so hectic and chaotic and painful. Whether it be just a phone call or you're looking for a mentor or anything right now, like that's definitely a possibility. Other than that, just doing a lot of speaking events and getting my view of the industry and the world out there and my experience. I've been doing a handful of other podcasts too that I've been on lately, and hopefully going to be doing a couple more here coming up and doing all kinds of guest speaking things. Really just loving the work. And the reason I think I love it so much, I'll just include this last note here, is that, this industry, we're involved in a doubly infinite good. So the reason I say that is because when we help a kid step away from a lifestyle that's the kind of the route where they're headed on. If you find yourself in this kind of industry as a client, you're usually headed in some kind of route that's not a positive one, and people are trying to stop that. So that right there, stopping them from being on that negative route, is an infinite good, because the amount of suffering and pain and things are infinite that the kid can experience. And even if, unfortunately, some kids succumb to this kind of craziness, the family still suffers after that. So it's not even like it just ends there. It continues on. So that's the one side of the infinite process, right? The other side is that if we help a kid go into a positive direction and live a good lifestyle and a healthy lifestyle, the impact of that on the world can be infinitely good, right? They can have kids now that go on and do good things in the world themselves. They can go and help other people. The joy of living a healthy lifestyle is just infinitely good. And so that's a part of why I do this, and why I fell in love with this work, is because it's an opportunity to be involved in like that doubly infinite good. And so that's just why I love to do it. And I'm hoping to just continue doing it and doing it even better.
That's really sweet. And I want to recognize your mother. Her name is Brenda Zane, who has a podcast of her own called the Hope Stream Podcast. I believe I had her on first, and then she connected me with you, and that's how you came to be on this podcast in 2020. And you're following the tradition of giving back, at least from your mom. And I know you have a lot of positive feelings for your dad too, who's is your dad an entrepreneur? What's his work?
He's a salesman. He's been a salesman since he was a baby, probably. I'm not sure. That's my dad. It's that word right there. Not a car salesman, but a good salesman. That's how my dad is. Yeah. And I love both of them. I'm super grateful for both of them. There's infinitely grateful.
And they stood by your side. And even though it must have been very difficult for them to make the choice to have you transported when you were young, in the end, at this point in your life, you see it as a very positive experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess one more fun thing coming up for me is I'll be starting grad school soon.
Nice.
Master's in addiction counseling. Yeah.
And where's that? Are you doing that?
At the Hazel and Betty Ford.
Oh, what
graduate
a great
school.
place to do it. Fantastic.
Yeah.
And what do you do in the outdoors for your mental health? What is the activity you like to do the most outdoors?
So the activity easily that I like to do the most is golf. It's hands down, far and away. And I say, honestly, like probably 10% of my thoughts that go on throughout the day are about golf. Whether it be that I'm like watching a YouTube golf video or whatever, like golf is just a major absolute favorite thing to do outdoors. And I'll kind of add this. In golf, you can hit a great shot into the middle of the fairway, and then you can hit another great shot onto the green, but then it bounces right next to the flag and you're all excited. And then it rolls down into the sand pit. And then you take 4 strokes to get out of the sand pit. And the 5th stroke you get out and it flies across to the other side of the green. And looking at that, there's just so many life lessons in an event like that and in a task like that can go from one beautiful process to just a kind of a wild, oh my gosh, how did we get here? Now I'm totally blowing the entire hole. And it's just a way for me to practice like my mental fortitude. It's much more a mental game than a physical game, I'd say. And I love it for that.
Oh, it's so humbling too. You can hit it and then you can feel really good. And then another hole. I'm not a big golfer, but I've golfed enough to be humbled. And then, oh, I think I know what I'm doing. And then just shank it somewhere.
Totally.
Oh,
yeah.
And so thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. And I'm going to have you on in a few years after graduate school and let's keep communicating. What is your email if people want to reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's Enzo, ENZO, at lifestrategiesmentors.com. So the website is also www.lifestrategiesmentors.com. And it'd be an absolute thrill to talk to anybody, whether it's just, hey, I have a kid who might be going to wilderness or might be in a situation similar to yours, or whether you're looking for a mentor, whatever the case is. Like I said earlier, any opportunity to try and help out is just an opportunity for me to redeem the craziness that I was living. I'd love to do it.
Fantastic. Fantastic, Enzo. Thank you for sharing your story once again on Stories from the Field.
Absolutely. It was a great time, Will. I appreciate you.